All right, everybody, it's about to start.
That's cool. That's cool. Yeah, they have a really good team.
Yeah, it's getting started. This is about to start. This town hall. All right. Hey, let's go. Okay, thank you everybody for joining us tonight. I appreciate everybody coming out here, taking out time of your day. My name is Anthony. I'm the vice president of the College Republicans. I wanted to host this debate. I mean, not this debate, this town hall.
Okay.
Between both candidates, Elad Gross and Scharf, Will Scharf.
Call me whatever you want.
Oh, don't go that.
I also want to acknowledge everybody who helped this event get started. SLU, the CRZ board, and also both campaigns. They were both very helpful and pretty much really easy to contact to help me get this event started. So I'm grateful for that. We also have pizza in the back if you guys didn't get any yet. And let's welcome our candidates, Will Scharf and Elad Gross, for today's discussions.
Before we get started, can everybody hear me okay in the back?
Yeah.
Good.
Good volume. Great. Sounds good. Keep that up the whole time. That would be impressive.
Both candidates.
Sounds like a challenge.
Just having a good time.
Both candidates will open with introductory remarks for 3 minutes each.
Okay. You want to go? I can introduce.
Rocks, paper,
you want me to introduce
rocks,
you
paper, scissors?
instead? We can flip it.
You want to do rocks, paper, scissors?
Okay. On shoot, right?
Rocks, paper, scissors, shoot.
Rocks? I do rock.
Rock, paper,
shoot.
Rock, paper, scissors, shoot.
Oh, now what do we do? Okay. Rock, paper, scissors, shoot.
Got it. There you go.
Okay. So what does that mean?
Go for it.
Okay. Hi, everybody. How we doing? All right, great. My name's Elad Gross. Thank you. I am running for Attorney General of Missouri to sue a whole bunch of scammers, including some of those in our government right now. Yes, thank you. Thank you. I am a former Assistant Attorney General back when the Attorney General's office used to work. It's not working so well right now. And I think there's so many people in this room because we all understand that. And we deserve and should be demanding a whole lot more from our government and folks in our leadership right now. I grew up right here in St. Louis, small town. You might have heard of it, very close by. I live over in South St. Louis City in Carondelet. My wife is here, Tasha. Hello. Hi, everybody. Hello. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I know some of you are a little upset that Liberty Bell's not here, my little dog, but we do have coloring pages of her up there, so feel free to take those and you can have your little associate animal. But no, look, I got a lot of ideas for the Attorney General's office. You can see a whole lot of those on the website. I practice civil rights law for the most part and government transparency law in Missouri. I've taken our government to court many times and won on behalf of Missourians who honestly have been screwed over by the folks who are running our state right now. We deserve an Attorney General who will represent us, and I'm running to be your Attorney General. So thank you all for coming. Thank you all for hosting this. And I'm excited to hear your questions and all of yours too. So thank you all for participating in this. Really appreciate it.
Good evening, y'all. My name is Will Scharf. I'm also a candidate for Attorney General. I'm a Republican. I actually agree with a lot of what Elad just said. I think for far too long, we've had a deeply corrupted culture in Jefferson City, a deeply corrupted culture in both parties that are robbing the state blind and letting our state fall further and further behind its peers. I think it's pretty simple. Our economy is being outpaced by our peer competitors. Our streets are overrun with crime. Our schools are consistently failing. And nobody in Jefferson City seems particularly concerned about it. I think the politicians who have been running this state for the last 4 or 5 decades, Republicans and Democrats both, are deeply in hock to a very narrow set of special interests and lobbyists and political insiders. And they get rich and they have a lot of fun in Jefferson City. And meanwhile, the state falls further and further and further behind. We're sitting here in St. Louis. St. Louis was once one of the great cities in America. It's writ large over the course of American history. Culturally, politically, economically. We used to have more Fortune 500 headquarters here in St. Louis than any other city in the country not named New York. And today what we've seen is urban decline. That decline is mirrored all over the state of Missouri in both urban and rural areas. And again, the folks running the show in Jefferson City don't seem particularly concerned. I've never run for office before. I'm a political outsider. Elad has a little more experience in this than I do. My background is as a constitutional attorney. I was a federal violent crimes prosecutor in downtown St. Louis in the U.S. Attorney's Office. And I've been a conservative activist. I've fought for conservative causes for most of my career. I'm running to be your next Attorney General because I think we need to fundamentally reshape the way that we do government in Jefferson City. I believe the Attorney General's office needs to be first and foremost a guardian of Missourians' rights, not a guardian of special interests. And I think unless we kick the people out who are currently running the state, we're going to keep getting more of the same. And more of the same is simply unacceptable. Thank you.
Currently, St. Louis has the highest homicide rate of any U.S. city, with a homicide rate of 69.4 per every 100,000 residents. Due to this, the first subject that we will be discussing is crime. There will be 2 questions, and each participant in the town hall will have 5 minutes to answer each. The first question is, given the proposed changes that could allow the governor to appoint a special prosecutor for violent crimes in specific areas such as St. Louis, how do you view the balance between local judicial authority and state intervention in prosecutorial decisions? Mr. Scharf, would you like to begin?
Yeah, sure. Look, crime's an issue that's near and dear to my heart. There are a lot of violent criminals sitting in federal prison today because I sent them there. When you think about the crime issue, St. Louis is #1 in the nation for violent crime and murders, if you look over the last 15 years. It's been that way for a while. We don't lead the charts in just about anything, but violent crime, we have it totally covered. In terms of local control, which is the question, the problem that we've had for far too long is local malfeasance. You know, the Kim Gardner problem in the Circuit Attorney's Office isn't something that randomly popped up in 2023. This was a problem that began when she first took office in 2017. And there were any number of things that Jefferson City could have done to ensure that violent crime was prosecuted in the city of St. Louis, whether that's appointing a special prosecutor, concurrent jurisdiction in the AG's office, programs like Eric Schmidt's Safer Streets program, which saw much tighter coordination between state and federal authorities. There were any number of solutions, and yet the folks running the show in Jefferson City didn't see a need to get involved. They were happy to let St. Louis burn because the St. Louis constituency wasn't their constituency. And to me, that's shameful and disgraceful. I think going forward, we need to be open-eyed about what it takes to take on violent crime. Look, I'll get a little bit nerdy here for a second. When you look at violent crime follows a very tight Pareto distribution. A very small number of people are responsible for a wildly disproportionate amount of violent crime. So really the solution is incapacitation. For each guy that you take off the streets, you're not just punishing a single crime, you're preventing potentially 12 or 24 or 36 more serious felony offenses over the next couple years. That was our approach in the U.S. Attorney's Office. That's a statistically validated approach going back to Operation Ceasefire in Boston in the 1990s. That's how we need to be thinking about this issue, whether it's on the policing front, the prosecution front, or in the courts. I think we have problems in all 3 of those areas right now. And again, I think the folks running Jefferson City either don't care or don't know better, at least most of them. And to me, that's just deeply, deeply frustrating.
Yeah,
I know most of y'all are here to see a lot. I won't be offended if you don't
I'm here to
applaud,
see
but
you.
I appreciate it nonetheless.
I came to see you, buddy. Look, some of you know this, and in 2019, there was a large discussion about children who were being shot and killed in our area. And I remember posting something about this, and it was very sad. It happened in the Hyde Park neighborhood. So before I was an attorney, and one of the big reasons why I went into the law was because of my work with kids here in St. Louis City. I ran a nonprofit organization that worked with kids all over. And that kid that I was posting about, there wasn't a name posted. I got a message from a nun who told me that that was one of my kids. It was one of the kids that I had taught. He was going to start first grade the next day. He was shot and killed in his backyard. His 2 sisters were there, and his mom and dad came out to watch him die. Look, what is happening here in our city, in our state, and really all over our country in so many areas because we're not addressing this in the right way, is that we're not only impacted, right? Obviously, we're losing people. We will never get them back. Those families are going to be broken forever. folks like me who are as distant, I mean, not as distant, but pretty freaking distant from all of this, think about this all the time too. It's a big deal. On my website right now, and it's been there for a while, and I've talked to a whole lot of folks about this, from prosecutors to community members to just everybody who's been impacted by this. There's a long and detailed plan, probably a little bit too dorky for me to even go into right now, but there's a long and detailed plan to reduce violence in the state of Missouri. Right now, if you ask our Attorney General, what is your plan to deal with violence in Missouri? There isn't one. There isn't one. We don't have a coordinated effort for our state to deal with violence. It doesn't just happen in one area and, oh, we hit the border, so we're not going to go there. It's all over our state, and folks can move. So there's a couple. I think that prosecution is extremely important. You have to set expectations, and folks who are in that small group have to know that if you're going to make a bad decision, bad things are going to happen. So don't do it. But there's another end to that, because we have to prevent violence before it happens. After it happens, someone is already dead. A family has already been broken. So my plan goes further than that. It works with community members. It brings folks together to the table to make sure that people who can be diverted from making these bad decisions don't make it in the first place. This has worked all over the country where folks have implemented it. It has worked actually outside of our country too. So I think we need to have a discussion not just about, okay, prosecutions are important, coordinating those, and our Attorney General isn't really doing much of that right now at all. But we have to also talk about prevention, because otherwise we're going to keep losing folks, and especially our kids, if we don't do anything about it. So it's a long and detailed plan. I'd be happy to answer more questions if those come up today. But I would highly encourage you to look into it, look into a few models about how this has worked in other cities too, because we absolutely can do that here in Missouri. We just need leadership that's willing to do it. So thank you for the time.
Missouri has seen varied trends in crime, with some areas reporting decreases while others experience increases. How do you propose to ensure the integrity and accuracy of crime data, and how would this information guide your policy recommendations?
Who do you want to? You want me to go first? Or?
Yeah, let's alternate.
Yeah, we can do that. Yeah, so no, that's a big problem. Right now, data, and it's not just in Missouri. I don't want to rag on Missouri, all of this, but really all across the country. Some of that has changed. So there are some new reporting requirements about use of force, for example, about how those vehicle stops are being done. So there's some implementation that takes a little bit of time to get there. But here's the thing, like in Missouri, we've got a long history of putting out report after report after report and then not doing very much with it. So yeah, I mean, look, I think that we've got some statutes right now that require compliance with reporting on these statistics generally. I would take the approach that the Attorney General should be working hand in hand with prosecutors, law enforcement officials, agencies, all of that, in order to make sure that we are complying to the level that the law requires. I think that it's much easier if you can deal with these problems before they are problems by having folks who are there and saying, look, how can we get you to do this better? Because, look, I fought for the Sunshine Law quite a bit in Missouri. It's the law that allows us to see public records, to participate in our government. I'm a very, very big fan of transparency in Missouri. And when we don't have that data available to the public in a readily available form, then we don't have that transparency. We can't make as good of decisions as if we had those. So I think that we should be a partner with law enforcement agencies to make sure they are doing that. But where, you know, you've got some folks sometimes, and unfortunately, people who don't want to follow the law and people who maybe they have small departments and folks are trying to, you know, whistle blow and say, hey, here's what's going on. The Attorney General should be there to help those law enforcement officers doing the right thing. So we certainly will be working with folks who want to work with us, and if they don't want to comply with the law, we'll make them comply with the law. That's the job of the Attorney General.
Yeah, when you look at crime statistics, there are only two numbers that are actually worthwhile, that are comparable over time and across different jurisdictions. One is murders, non-negligent homicides, because once there's a body, police sort of have to report on it. And the other is clearance rate. It's how many of those murders are being solved. Those are the only two numbers that I believe are worth tracking longitudinally and actually give you the ability to compare how different departments are doing in terms of crime enforcement and in terms of their approach to solving crime. The book I always recommend on this is Jill Leove's Ghetto Side. Jill Leove was an LA Times reporter dealt with sort of South LA crime over a period of decades. It's a fascinating book that gets deep into the statistical issues. The problem with statistical manipulation is one of misaligned incentives. If you're a police chief, you get credit for showing a reduction in violent crime, which means that you have every incentive in the world to take a robbery and turn it into a burglary, to take a burglary and turn it into a property crime, to take a shooting, an assault one, and turn that into an unlawful use of weapon with a discharge. The lower down you get those crimes, the lower category they're in, the better you look on paper. And the only thing keeping departments honest is ultimately murder numbers, is numbers that they can't make disappear. Now, I don't think there are any bad motives at play here. I think it's just people responding to incentives. What we need to do as a state is, actually, as Elad said before, we need an overarching plan to actually tackle violent crime. We can't just sort of leave this to local authorities. We need to be thinking holistically about the violent crime problem we have and what we can actually do to drive those numbers down. So right now in the city of St. Louis, we were very excited when murders dropped from their all-time high or just about their all-time high in 2020. Well, this year, year on year, we've seen an increase in murders over last year. Clearance rate is about maybe 1 in 2 in a good year. Right now, if you commit a murder in the city of St. Louis, your chances of serving a significant prison time for that murder are probably less than 1 in 4. Until that basic scenario is changed, until we have certainty of enforcement around serious crime, you're going to keep getting more and more and more crime. And that's the cycle that we need to flip. Right now, we're in a vicious cycle. We need to turn that into a virtuous cycle, where we take the highest propensity, most dangerous people, we put them in prison, we allow neighborhoods to exist in safety, we allow kids to go to school without living in fear of being shot or get hit by crossfire. I mean, that's the situation that we're dealing with. On the statistical point, I think we need statewide coordination so that we're comparing apples to the extent possible. But I think at the end of the day, we need to focus on what's really important, which is making sure that people who commit the most heinous offenses are punished for those offenses.
Next topic is on election integrity. The bedrock of a constitutional republic by which officials are elected through a democratic process is free and fair elections. With the public's confidence in elections at an all-time low, an unprecedented low, it is vital to restore the public's trust. If the voting machines used in our elections are not being used in accordance with the requirements set forth in the congressionally passed HAVA Act, Help America Vote Act, where adherence is mandatory in Missouri, because our state is receiving taxpayer federal HAVA funds, would this fall under a consumer complaint or a Deceptive Trade Act complaint? Mr. Scharf, would you like to?
Yeah, let me talk about election integrity more broadly, and then I'll get to the HAVA issue specifically. When you think about election integrity, you're basically looking at 4 different buckets of issues. One is ingress, is how are your ballots entering the system? 2 is custody. How are those ballots being held from the point that they're cast, whether that's by absentee, in-person early, or in-person day of, to the point that they're counted. The 3rd is the counting process itself, which gets a lot of attention with the machines and all that. And then the 4th is audit, is the ability to go back and look at the ballots after the fact and ensure that the election results match the auditable paper trail. Right now, we have a real problem in America in essentially all 4 of those buckets. The Carter commissions after the 2000 and 2004 elections, these were bipartisan commissions, both said that the single greatest avenue for fraud in our election system was mail-in absentee ballots, that was the weakest part of our voting system. The trend in America in the last decade and a half has been increased mail-in absentee votes. On the custody side, instead of having ballots held in secure custody by election officials, we've seen a rise in things like ballot drop boxes or the post office holding ballots in insecure facilities, and that's a real problem. On the counting side, I mean, we had an Obama-appointed, for the sake of the audience, an Obama-appointed federal judge in Georgia, Judge Tottenberg, last year say that the election machines used in the state of Georgia in both 2020 and 2022 were so insecure from a cybersecurity standpoint that their use constituted a federal civil rights violation. That was in a lawsuit brought by primarily liberal activist groups against the Republican Secretary of State. But I think we need real security in terms of how votes are being counted. And then we need an auditable paper trail. Without that, you end up with absolute chaos after the fact in elections. In terms of the HAVA issue specifically, I think we have a lot of local election officials in this state who want to do things the easy way. They don't want to enforce the law. They don't want to take the very difficult steps that it takes to ensure that their voting machinery and their poll pads are actually secured against cyber intrusion or tampering or whatever else it is. I think the law needs to be enforced. I'm not sure if it's precisely a consumer protection issue, but I think the AG's office has a real role to play there. But overall, I think that we need an election system that makes it very easy to vote, but very difficult to cheat. I think Missouri is farther along the way to that goal than a lot of other states, and I think that's a good thing. But ultimately, we want an election system where at the end of the election, everybody agrees what happened. I mean, this has been the dynamic throughout most of American history, that the day after the election, with very few exceptions, everyone wakes up and knows who the winner is. I think that's what we need to be aiming for, and that's ultimately what will increase confidence in our elections and strengthen the democratic aspects of our constitutional republic.
I mean, another thing that would be helpful is if some of these jackasses who are elected wouldn't go around saying that our elections suck. I mean, especially when they know it's not. Look, I know a lot of the election clerks here in Missouri. I've gotten to interact with a whole bunch of them, and they do really great work. And a lot of folks ask, I've even had them on, some of you watch the podcast stuff we do, open town halls, anybody can ask them questions. And some folks who come out, and I didn't know this, like how do they verify those signatures when we have the petitions? How do they look to see if there's some kind of voter fraud? And even the Heritage Foundation, which loves to find these things, looking in Missouri, hasn't found anything since, I think the last one was 2017, some incidents or whatever. So I mean, look, like if we're talking about Missouri, we're talking about folks who are here right now, I mean, come on. Like we're seeing what's going on, and sure, like there are going to be problems. And so I don't think it's a Merchandising Practices Act violation or a consumer protection issue. It would be a civil rights law issue. So I have proposed, it would be. So I have proposed starting Missouri's first civil rights division at the Attorney General's office. I do think that we have to protect our right to vote. And right now, the issue, if we're talking about our right to vote, look what our Attorney General just did. He disagreed with the abortion petition, the reproductive freedom petition, so he wasted all of our time in court. Even other Republicans said, like, what are you doing? Wasted all this time, so you and I couldn't go out and collect signatures in as much time as we had, right? So it was a miracle. You talk about 3 months from all these other months that are wasted by our Attorney General on this whole thing, and we collected 380,000 signatures to put that on the ballot. It is absolutely ridiculous that that guy was able to go to court and delay it and delay it and delay it over and over again, had to have judges rewrite things for him, had to have judges tell him he was violating the law, had the state auditor, who's a Republican, tell him, what are you doing? You're not the king of Missouri, before this guy would follow the law. Look, there are going to be things that Missourians propose that I don't agree with. I'm sure I talk to folks all the time who don't agree with me on some things. That doesn't mean that we throw out our democracy because we have these disagreements. And I agree. We do have to get back to a time where now we can have these discussions with each other. We have a process in place. We respect that process because we know what this state and what this country can be when our voices are heard. So I think that's really where a lot of this focus needs to be when we're talking about election integrity in Missouri.
What if it's the Secretary of State's office that is approving non-compliant voting systems? Does the Attorney General office have any authority to handle that If we can't go to the Attorney General in this matter, where can we go?
You should go to the Attorney General. So when I'm Attorney General, you can come straight to me. If any of you have a problem at your polling place, you'll be able to call the Attorney General's office. If you have an issue with something that's happening before, call the Attorney General's office. And unlike the current Attorney General, you will get an answer. Someone is going to call you back and say, hey, here's the issue, here's what we're working on, you tell us what you want to see from your Attorney General. Right now, I know so many folks in Missouri who have tried to contact that office for a wide range of issues, and they get absolutely nothing back. And they're sitting there and they call me because they thought that I was the Attorney General because they Googled me wrong. I mean, it's fun and all, but not yet, guys. We're working on it, so keep going.
I get that a lot, too.
Yeah, I'm sure, yeah, because, and you probably respond more than the current guy does. I mean, I mean, you know, sometimes as private attorneys, you know, we can do some things that maybe he just won't do, which is unfortunate. But yeah, that again, that would be, in my view, that is a civil rights issue. And once that civil rights division is started, that will be your direct interface on any kind of voter election integrity issues at all. That will be it.
It is a civil rights issue, and that is the responsibility of the AG's office. I think that concern speaks to a broader point, though, which is that for far too long, our political leadership in Jefferson City, whether it's the Attorney General's office, the governor's office, et cetera, have been willing to kowtow to local bureaucrats, to other office holders, whoever. They don't want to row against the stream. They don't want to get their friends and colleagues, you know, nose out of order. So they keep playing along with whatever's going on. And the people who end up hurt are ordinary, everyday Missourians. To me, that's the Jefferson City mindset. It's go along to get along. And when you have issues, the HAVA violations in St. Charles County or wherever, where you have issues where the law isn't being followed, it's often a lot easier for these guys to sweep things under the rug than it is to do the tough work to hold officials accountable. And I'm running for office because I want those games to stop. I think the people of Missouri deserve better than political games, and I want to hold those people accountable. I want to hold Jefferson City accountable, and I want to fight for Missourians' rights every single day, whether that's the right to have your vote counted, whether that's the right to live in a safe community, whether that's the right to have your children educated in a fair, effective way. Up and down the line, state government is failing because people aren't willing to hold these bureaucrats and office holders accountable. And to me, that's just shameful.
As the English philosopher Edmund Burke pointed out in the 1790s,
Now you're talking my language.
Not mine.
every young generation is a group of barbarians within the gates that must be civilized before it is too late. As such, the mode of making sure that the young generation does not turn society from the inside out, education, is a major debate that is on many people's minds. After all, how should people educate children? For the first question, we would like to ask, as Attorney General, how would you approach legal challenges and uphold the constitutionality of education laws in Missouri, particularly those that govern curriculum content and parental rights in schools? This involves ensuring both the enforcement of new educational statutes and the protection of individual rights under the state and federal constitution.
Is this me or you? Yeah, look, DESE is a train wreck. Our State Department of Elementary and Secondary Education has a budget of over $10 billion a year. They have over 1,800 employees. The budget keeps getting higher and higher and higher, and yet our results keep getting worse and worse and worse. Missouri schools, Missouri school children had more learning loss post-COVID than almost any other state in the country. We did significantly worse even than many blue states in that respect, which locked down and kept kids out of school for far longer. Less than 1 in 4 Missouri 8th graders is proficient in math and reading, according to DESE's numbers. That's just shameful. To me, it's not necessarily a resourcing problem, it's a leadership problem. When you have a State Department that views its constituencies as administrators in districts instead of parents and children, their incentives are to cover up for districts, to cover up for failing administrators, and to keep things going as normally as they can, because that's who they believe they're ultimately serving. I think we need to flip that on its head. I think we need an education system in this state that's going to be parent and student focused, not district and administrator focused. I've said that I want to investigate DESE. On day one, I'll hit them with sunshine requests. I believe that they are violating state law on curricular issues, on classroom issues, on any number of other issues in many ways, and I'd like to bring that to light. I think it's very important that the law is enforced. And I think you have too many bureaucrats in Jefferson City, particularly those who work for departments that aren't directly politically accountable, that answer to appointed commissions, who feel empowered just to do whatever the heck they want. And when the results are as bad as they've been for a state like ours in an issue like education for as long as they have been that bad, I think real change is needed. The fact that Margie Van Dieven was in office from 2015 until last year, that's the Commissioner of Education in the state, while results got worse and worse and worse, while teachers all across the state were crying out about the preparation level of students as they progressed up through the grades, while we saw our state universities have to pay more and more and more for remedial education of kids who were graduating from high school and ending up in college with the inability to keep up with college-level coursework. To me, again, that speaks to a deep culture of failure on the part of Jefferson City. And if we keep putting Jefferson City people back in charge, we're going to keep getting the same results.
I think that Mr. Burke guy was wrong. Second and third graders are the barbarians for sure. Those kindergartners are very sweet. Man, I've been working in, especially with St. Louis public schools, but really kids all over our state for the last 15 years, despite looking like I should be in high school right now. I swear I'm a real lawyer.
Got a great head of hair.
Thank you. Thank you. If you look at what is happening in Missouri from our education system for a long, long time now, we have been defunding our public schools. We've been doing it. We've been doing it. And if you look at how much we're spending today versus just 10 years ago per student from the state, yeah, the number looks a little bit higher, but that whole inflation thing, don't forget about that. We are spending way less per student now from the state than we were 10 years ago. And then you look 10 years before that too at the pattern, all right? Here's the problem. When you are bent on breaking something in order to profit from it, and then you have control over it, we get this as a result. And so now, I've worked with a lot of public school teachers, a lot of public school students, a lot of public school parents. And who doesn't want to have a better education and a better future for their kids? Hell, my mom sacrificed just about everything she had to make sure I got to go to Clayton Public Schools here, and I am forever grateful for that. Her credit card is probably a little less. But look, I mean, every child in Missouri, right, we have the same goal here. Every child in Missouri deserves real opportunity. My view is that back after the Civil War, we had the cutting-edge public school program in the entire world. They came here to look at Missouri. What in the world are you all doing? You had a public kindergarten, the first one. We had all this investment from the Republicans after the Civil War. And now look where we are. I think we need to be investing in our public school system. I think we need to be supporting our public school teachers. I think we need to have that support from our legislature, and we need that support from our statewide officials too, because folks don't know what is happening, right? And I'll tell you this, I was in Bollinger County the other day at a Farm Bureau event. I went up there and they asked me this question about open enrollment and taking funds away from public schools to give them the voucher program. And I went up and they asked me this question. I said, it's a terrible bill. It's going to hurt. It is an attack on rural Missouri too. And they are going to come for your schools. They're going to start closing them and consolidating them. And you know, all right, well, that's the Democrat who's up there. A Republican elected official comes up, one after the next, including candidates. And they're like, well, I don't know exactly why they're pushing this bill because it's not going to help us here. And the lady who was elected, maybe I won't say which office just in case she gets in trouble for it. It's unrecorded. But she just got elected over there and said, I'm a former teacher. I'm a former administrator. We absolutely need more accountability in the system, but we need to be supporting our public schools because we are defunding them, and this will defund them even further. So if we want to flip that, we have to flip the folks we're sending to Jefferson City for sure.
Given the significant legislative focus on school choice, including bills proposing open enrollment and expanding charter schools, how do you plan to address the potential impact of these measures on public school funding and the quality of education across different districts? Additionally, with various bills addressing parental rights and curriculum content, how will you ensure a balanced approach that respects parental input while maintaining educational integrity and inclusiveness?
Yeah, so we need to fund our schools. I think I mentioned that a couple times already. Yeah, look, I think from the Attorney General's office, I think transparency is extremely important. It's not just the Sunshine Law, folks, by the way, because I litigate these cases often now, unfortunately, but we actually have laws already on the books that allow any of us to see curricular materials in our schools outside of the Sunshine Law. I mean, a lot of them have to put them online. They do, and you can see them, and you can get there too. Now, in some situations, you might have somebody who's doing the wrong thing. Hell, that's in any system, and so there needs to be accountability in any single system that we have, especially those that are spending our taxpayer money, which is why it's great that we have school boards, elected school boards that are elected locally, so you have more control over your schools. Like, that's a big part of this. So I think transparency is extremely important. That's something that can certainly be brought from the Attorney General's office. But the way to address the program to defund our public schools right now is we need a new governor, we need new legislators, and I certainly will be out there in town halls all over the state letting folks know what they are doing to our public schools. Because if we're not investing in our kids, what the hell is any of this about anyway? That's my view. So.
So I'm going to respond to that a little bit. The funding issue isn't as simple as people make it out to be. We have districts that spend very little per pupil and get incredible results, even adjusting for economics and demography. We have districts that spend an absolute ton per pupil and get very bad results. SLPS, St. Louis Public Schools, spends over $23,000 a year per student and does an abysmal job at educating its students. Sorry, what?
SLPS is fully accredited now.
I know it's fully accredited and the results are terrible. If you look at proficiency in math and reading, any reasonable metric, SLPS is not doing a great job.
One thing, that test is not really valid. It doesn't have the important measure. It's highly reliable because the test scores around the state almost 100% align with the economic level of that school district.
I beg to differ. You have districts, for example, like Lindbergh.
Ma'am, we have a Q&A period.
Lindbergh's doing great. Lindbergh spends about 70% less than Parkway, or so, excuse me, it spends about 60% to 70% per pupil of what Parkway is spending, and it gets significantly better results. I agree with you on the war zone. I spoke about crime before. I think it's, ma'am, I prosecuted hundreds of criminals in the city of St. Louis. I respect your service. What I'm saying is not an attack on you. I'm happy to talk more with you afterwards. I'm happy to give you my card. I'd love to engage with you more. What I think a big part of the problem, though, is you have some administrators who run good school districts. You have other administrators who don't. When you have, ma'am, would you just? I'm happy to.
The candidate has the floor.
I'm happy to talk to you afterwards. I really am. I mean,
We'll stick around. Don't worry.
I'm more than happy to.
We'll stick around.
I think when you look at spend per pupil across the state, you see wildly varying results, not just based on demography. And a big component of that is administrator overhead. You have superintendents who are doing a bad job at their jobs with pay packages of $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 a year. To me, that's a real problem, and it speaks to a misallocation of resources. Now, I'm in favor of school choice measures. I think we need to make sure that parents are centered in the educational process. I think if that means expanding parental choice on where they send their kids to schools, that's a good thing. I think a lot of that can exist within the public school system, whether that's with charters, whether that's through open enrollment. I also believe in ESAs and educational savings accounts and really empowering parents to make the decisions that they think are best for their students. But overall, I fight the idea that this is all about, I don't know what's going on behind me. That this is
feeling you.
that this is all about overall funding levels. because I think funding is actually, statistically, is not a great predictor of educational attainment in this state. And to me, that speaks to a problem in leadership and accountability. And if our State Department of Education isn't doing its job of holding administrators and holding districts accountable for the results that they're getting out of their pupils, I think that's a real problem. And that's something a problem I'd like to be involved in fixing if I were Attorney General.
All right, at this point, we want to open up to the audience the opportunity for questions. And we'll take 15 minutes to do so. Each candidate will have 3 to 5 minutes to answer questions.
Okay. Sounds great.
I think I read that wrong.
Okay. We can do it
15
again.
minutes for Q&A.
Yeah, let's do it again.
And we're going to go ahead and take questions from the audience.
Yes, there is a, if you guys would like to either raise your hands or there's a QR code that you could scan and we can process them electronically, whatever works best for the audience.
Oh, that's cool. So they can scan a question in and then it goes to you?
Yes.
Really? Look at this fancy thing. It's not working. It's not working. Okay.
It's not
well,
working?
that can happen sometimes. Yeah, sure.
Elad, who brings 4 HD cameras
I didn't
to
do
us
that.
candidates,
I didn't even know what this is.
impressed by
Okay?
QR
I didn't do
codes.
that.
Yes, we have 28 responses.
Oh, wow. Oh, so it is working. That's fake news up there. That's what that was. How are you? Okay. If it's not loud, wave your hand on the first one. I'll read it back out to you before. Yeah.
Am I speaking loudly enough? Can you guys hear me?
You did it the whole time. You said you could. You said you could.
That means each of them have
You've spoken in court. You know how it is.
I just
3
did
minutes
today.
to 5 to respond to each. Let's go with 3.
Need
because we
water,
have
though.
long questions. Is there any that you would?
And guys, just while they're doing this, I also just want to thank SLU Police for being here, for keeping us safe. When I first came in, they told me they weren't expecting a disturbance tonight, which sounded like vaguely menacing, and I was
Yeah, it is.
a little bit worried.
Get
but
your attention pretty quick. It's good.
Thank
Yeah,
you, guys.
Yeah, it's a good hook. Thank you.
Just kind of start at the top. Go for it.
Sure.
You guys feeling it? You got a good one?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Let's do it.
Each of you will have 3 minutes to respond. What are you going to do for me as a citizen, and how does the Attorney General's office affect me?
That's a good question. Am I taking this one? You want to take this one?
I'll take it if you want.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
First and foremost, I'll fight for you. Again, I mean, I feel like a broken record at this point, but we have a deeply broken leadership culture in Jefferson City where our elected leaders are beholden to special interests and lobbyists and to this unelected political class in Jefferson City, as opposed to being accountable to the people who put them there in the first place, the voters of the state of Missouri. I think that's a dynamic that we need to change. I think it's a bipartisan dynamic. I think it's true of Republicans and Democrats. I'll say this, I think it was shameful that you weren't the Democrat nominee last cycle. I think that party leaders decided that Elad, who had been driving all over the state, meeting with thousands of people, had been working his absolute tail off for 2 years, this is in the 2020 cycle, that they wanted somebody else. And they sort of got together, and my perception was installed a different candidate. I think we're dealing with this bipartisan set of political insiders. And frankly, they've had their chance. They've been running this state for a very long time, and our state's not getting ahead. I think the people of Missouri aren't getting the results that they deserve out of government in Jefferson City because the insiders have a very different agenda than we do. So my commitment is that I will fight for you. I will stand up for the rights of every Missourian. I will put the voters of Missouri first and foremost and only. And I really don't care what the lobbyists or the special interests have to say about just about anything. I haven't taken a dollar from lobbyists. I won't, because I think it's wrong, and I think it's a deep problem.
Yeah, I don't know who the you is, but you're out there somewhere in here. Yeah, I think, look, number one, I've mentioned this a little bit briefly, but the Attorney General's office right now and its management is not doing so hot. There's a lot of good people who are working there. I used to be one, and a long time. I don't know if I was a good one or not. That's up to you all to decide. But look, they're just wonderful folks who could get paid a whole lot more. But they're there because they believe in serving the state of Missouri. They want to do that for you, right? So I think we need a whole lot more folks in that office working for you. I think that's what we need. You should be able to call the Attorney General with a problem, and the Attorney General should get back to you. That's pretty basic, but we really need that right now in Missouri. One commitment that I have made many times in the campaign, because I travel so much, as you pointed out, but so are you. You're traveling quite a bit too, is to have town halls regularly throughout the state of Missouri as your Attorney General. There are so many folks where I ask, hey, who here knows who your Attorney General is? Right? And a lot of people have no idea. Heck, the guy's not even here tonight. Okay? So there's a lot of folks. There are a lot of folks who have no idea who the guy is, don't know his name, think it might still be Eric Schmidt or Josh Hawley or something, because that was a name we heard before. But you should know who your attorney is. And I think we both agree it's a pretty big red flag if you don't know the name of your attorney. Okay? So, one, we've got to change that. Two, if anybody here is dealing with increased costs, I know I sure am. We've got a big problem with consolidation in our economy right now. We have all of these mega corporations getting bigger and bigger by the minute, and every single study shows in healthcare, telecom, agriculture, everything. They're consolidating, prices go up, consumers have less voice in that process, and the people who should be standing up for us are our state attorneys general. As your attorney general, I will make sure to enforce our antitrust laws and get back to doing what Teddy Roosevelt was doing, and that's busting the trust from here in Missouri and working with folks all over the state to get that done. Yes, I agree with that. We're going to make consumer protection great again in Missouri. I think that's a freaking thing that we've got to get done here. I will start our state's first civil rights division. I will bring back our conservation division. We used to have that. Jay Nixon started a wonderful one, and now we don't got one. So when we talk about nuclear waste in North County in the St. Charles area, heck, you've been to a lot of meetings. Our Attorney General is nowhere to be found. He can sue Joe Biden for just about everything, but he can't do it to protect the citizens of the state of Missouri. So we're going to change that too. So obviously I could talk all day on this one. I'm going to be done there. But look, I really encourage you. We spent a whole long time on that website, a lot of input from people in Missouri about what we can do for Missourians from Missouri with Missouri money, and we're going to get back to doing that when I'm Attorney General.
I just want to, if I can, I want to speak to the nuclear waste issue. Do we have general consent to me taking 2 minutes on this?
I consent, yes.
This is actually something Elad and I agree on. We have a real problem in this region with nuclear waste that was put here by the federal government, starting with the Manhattan Project and continuing for decades thereafter. The federal government covered it up for over 50 years, is still essentially gaslighting community activists about the nature and scope of the problem. It's absolutely shameful. I first met Dawn Chapman, Just Mom's STL, in 2015, and a whole bunch of folks in Jefferson City told me that she was crazy. Told me she was, a nut who didn't know what she was talking about, that the situation was under control, that Westlake landfill wasn't dangerous. And then I looked into it myself, and I realized that she was absolutely correct. And the corporate lobbyists and the insiders in Jefferson City didn't know what the heck they were talking about. To me, we need a government that's going to fight for Missourians. The radioactive waste issue, to me, is one of the greatest examples where our state government has failed to protect Missourians from very, very serious harm. We're talking cancer, autoimmune disorders. I mean, absolute insanity over a period of 50 years. And yet no one picks up the phone today. And to me, if you want something that's emblematic of the failure of Jefferson City, the failure to take decisive action years ago over the nuclear waste problem that's literally poisoning families in St. Louis and St. Charles counties, I mean, there's no better example than that.
Yeah, understand.
Thank you.
We've been to a lot of the same meetings.
Absolutely. I was texting with Dawn earlier today, and hi, Dawn. Hi, I'm sure you're watching out here, but yeah, I mean, and right now, for those who maybe you're just learning about this, follow Just Mom's STL. I've been working with them for years on sunshine law issues and getting these records to prove what they're saying. But right now in Congress, there is a big debate over increasing, actually including Missourians right now in compensation for this. It's called RRCA, R-E-C-A. So please look that up. You'll find ways to contact folks in Congress. Very happy to say that Josh Hawley, Cori Bush, and Eric Schmidt have been great on this issue, and they are fighting for folks right now in Missouri. And so you can see just from those names, it's a wide berth of people here in Missouri.
I'll throw Maria Chappelle-Nadal.
Yep, absolutely. Yep.
Former state senator. I agree with her on literally nothing, but she was an early voice of the truth on this particular issue.
Yep.
She stood on the Senate floor, and I was in the governor's office at the time. It was a real pain in the neck. But she raised serious awareness for this issue, and I give her a lot of credit for it. But this is, to me, the way that the political establishment in Jefferson City of both parties is willing to look past serious problems because it's inconvenient to deal with those problems. And that's a real problem.
Yeah.
Gentlemen, thank you for your responses. The next question is, as Attorney General, how will you tackle illegal immigration?
Yeah. Illegal immigration, how would you tackle illegal immigration as Attorney General? Is it my turn to go first this time?
You can, or I'm happy to.
I mean, what? Yeah, it's so. Look, right now, I think it's interesting to see how much money we're spending at the border of Texas as Missouri taxpayers right now. $2.2 million bill. Is that what we're signing today over there? Look, I know that folks have some opinions on all of these things, and I've got some certainly too. I think Missouri taxpayers should be spent on Missourians. I do think that this is an issue that comes here. Look, I'm going to give you a shout out for a second here, Kevin, but Kevin Fitzgerald does fantastic work in a lot of this space, and thanks to you, I have learned quite a bit about fentanyl in our state right now. It has been a very eye-opening experience, and we are seeing a lot of transfer right now because we're not secure. Our border right now, because we have inaction in Congress, is not as secure as it needs to be. We have a bill that has been proposed, language right now, to put these devices that are amazing, and they detect fentanyl as it's coming in. So like we can do that right now, but because of inaction in Congress, and everybody wants to preserve this issue for one thing or another, we all get to suffer here in Missouri. Fentanyl is now replaced, methamphetamine, sometimes it's even mixed with it, I've heard in some places, especially on the western side of the state. So it does, certainly us not taking action on issues at the border are going to impact folks in Missouri. But we should be doing smart things about it, not things to get on TV cameras about it. And one of those is making sure that we have a coordinated effort in Missouri on this issue, human trafficking. The guy pretends like we've got one, but we really don't have one. But trafficking in general, and that includes drug trafficking here in Missouri too. We've got from the Attorney General's office all of these big pharma that we had to sue over the opioid crisis, and a lot of that money is supposed to be spent in our local communities dealing with drug addiction. Just the other day, I was in Jefferson City for actually the signature petition turn-in, and I met this lady who was in her car. She was trying to find where it was a fentanyl opioid overdose event that they were holding at the Capitol. And this lady was there, and we started talking. She was trying to find out where to park. If you've been to Jefferson City, you'll get it. And we started talking, and this poor lady lost both of her sons, both of them. So we talked for quite some time about her experiences. And look, I mean, there is so much more our government could be doing if it was focused on serving us. So from the Attorney General's office, I think there's a lot that we can do with crime generally and coordinating that. Missouri is a hotbed for trafficking because of our central location in the country. And so I do think that the Attorney General should be spending a lot of time there rather than all of this other crap that isn't getting anything done other than getting people on TV. There are actual things we can do. I have a plan on the website for this as well. But there's a whole lot that we have to do because we are losing people every day in this state because we're not taking activity on this issue. And if you haven't volunteered or learned a lot about this, you've got a great guy in the room right now for it. So definitely talk to him, and I really appreciate everything that you've done to educate me on that. So thank you.
Yeah, the reason states are spending money at the border is because our federal government has fundamentally abdicated its responsibility to secure the border. And what we're dealing with here in Missouri today is out-of-control drug trafficking. We're the third highest state on a per capita basis in the country for human trafficking. I used to prosecute fentanyl dealers in the U.S. Attorney's Office. I mean, when I first started, when I got out of law school, I clerked on the 8th Circuit downtown. And we saw a lot, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the 8th Circuit, and we saw a lot of drug cases. What we were dealing with at the time was largely heroin and largely domestically produced meth. St. Louis, historically, go back to the 80s and 90s, this was one of the heroin capitals of America because it's on key transshipment points. You had gangster disciples, you had these heroin gangs on the streets of St. Louis. I did not see a single heroin case in 2.5 years in the U.S. Attorney's Office. It's all fentanyl, and if you think you're consuming a different drug, you're not. You're just consuming fentanyl that's been cut with God knows what else. Yeah. People are dropping dead every day. Some of those are kind of career addicts who live in the most deplorable of circumstances, and we as a state aren't doing nearly enough to help get them out of their cycles of addiction. Some of them are kids who think they're doing some cocaine or some ecstasy at a party, and they're actually getting a hot shot of fentanyl because their dealer was dealing with weak product and decided to spike it a little bit and got his proportions wrong. I mean, I sent SWAT teams in to take down drug houses. I promise you, where they're mixing this stuff is not some sophisticated laboratory. It's a bunch of dudes who more often than not are high, dumping powder together in a bowl and hoping that they don't kill somebody on the back end. I mean, we dealt with what are called death-resulting cases, fentanyl distribution resulting in death cases in the U.S. Attorney's Office. Each of these stories is absolutely tragic, and it strikes at the crime problems we were talking about before, but ultimately where this is coming from is the border. We don't have domestically produced meth in America anymore. The era of guys cooking up meth in trailers wherever, that's over. Like the Breaking Bad dynamic is no longer the dynamic. You have incredibly pure meth, 98% pure meth, being trucked over the border in industrial quantities, and then trucked up, frankly, I-44 right through this state until they can hit, the roads at 270 and then right up to Chicago. We're at the epicenter of the drug and human trafficking crisis in America, and nobody in Jefferson City seems particularly bothered. I agree with Elad. Our response to the human trafficking epidemic in this state has been essentially ambiguous. No one seems to be willing to invest the resources and take the difficult steps that it would take to actually establish statewide coordination on this issue, to empower the highway patrol and local law enforcement agencies to work across county boundaries, to pursue the trafficking cartels, many of which are trafficking both people and drugs. I mean, these are difficult things, and the folks in Jefferson City seem unconcerned with doing them, probably because they're difficult. And until we change that mindset, until we break down that kind of groupthink that we deal with in state government, we're going to keep getting more of the same. And more of the same is people being trafficked, people being abused, and people dropping dead from drug overdoses. I mean, fentanyl is now the leading killer of young Missourians. It's not car crashes, it's not gun violence, it's overdose deaths. We can call them deaths of despair. It ties into the suicide epidemic as well. But ultimately, the reason so many people are dying from this stuff is I believe we've done a bad job as a state getting this problem under control when we still could have. And we're all going to have to reap the results of that. It's an incredibly sad situation, and it's something that all of us should be attuned to, not just in our race, but as you pick leaders up and down the ballot in this next cycle. Because I think it's one of the most important crises that we have to overcome as a state if we're going to build a better future for the state.
I agree. Yeah, I do. Just really briefly, because I know there's some folks who are watching this or they're going to watch it after, but there's a website right now. If you have been impacted, there's Narcan. I hope folks are familiar with that, but that's something that you can give to somebody as they are overdosing. I carry it with me, but it is available. I was just helping somebody get a whole bunch of these, but to have them available, if you go to MO, deaths.org. You can find locations where you can get those for yourself and for groups, communities, whatever you need. But that we actually need to put a lot more resources into educating folks about, making sure that that is available because we have to mitigate the damage that we are dealing with right now to save folks' lives. So highly encourage you, if you can, nomodeaths.org is a great resource for that too.
If we didn't have Narcan, we'd probably have double the overdose deaths in the state every year. Police officers in the back can probably speak to that. You talk to any guy on the street, they're Narcaning addicts almost every day. Maybe not every day, but far too often. So yeah, thanks for bringing that up.
How should the Attorney General respond to the recent college protests that have occurred at numerous schools, including SLU and WashU?
Yeah, protect the First Amendment. But don't protect violent rioting. I mean, you have a situation, Elad and I are both Jewish. You have a situation on college campuses across America today where Jewish students' rights aren't being protected, where Jewish students don't feel safe, where Jewish students are being physically barred from getting to class. That's a violation of their civil rights. I think the Biden administration, OCR and the Department of Education and the Department of Justice should have been all over this problem. And yet they have thousands of OCR complaints, Title VI complaints that they don't seem to be acting on. I think at the state level, we need to be attuned to these sorts of problems. So yeah, to me, it's protect the First Amendment. If people want to peacefully protest, that's absolutely their right. But when you cross the line into property destruction, into illegal occupations, into actual violence, there needs to be a robust response, both at the local and state level. And with respect to our private universities, I think WashU, I'm going to get some fire from this, I think WashU did a great job. That when they attempted to occupy campus quads, when it went from being a peaceful protest to being a demonstration that violated campus rules, and in some cases the law, they took aggressive action to stop that. I think that's exactly the sort of approach you need. Ring fence the First Amendment, make sure that people absolutely have the right to peacefully protest, but when it moves beyond that, there needs to be decisive action. Otherwise, the problem spreads and spreads and spreads, often fed by professional agitators, as we saw at Columbia in New York, and the problem just gets worse and worse and worse. Colleges need to be a place for learning. Students need to be able to get to class. Students need to be able to have access to the resources that they're paying for. And I think it's shameful that there hasn't been a more aggressive response in many places to this crisis that we're facing all over the country.
You know, I've been watching all of this for a good long time. So my mom, she was a soldier in the Israeli military during the Yom Kippur War. Heck, I mean, there are people that you see, and when this all happened, folks that, people are calling to see who is there and who's not responding and who's answering the phone and who's not. And I'm sure that has happened a lot for many, many folks in that region. Just, I don't know if it was yesterday or the day before, I was watching some video, and there was a kid, college kid, talking about the student intifada. And you mentioned we're both Jews. I mean, it's an interesting time to be watching a lot of that and to wonder, like, what the hell is happening. And, I think about it a lot. It's just like, why, where have we, in terms of conversation, in terms of like just general civility and everything else, like, what is going on? And to me, I don't know, and maybe I'm wrong, but to me, I keep thinking about folks who are just, like, they're talking about the U.S. and certain, like, there's no opportunity here, and what the hell is, I'm criticizing this. What a failure of our country for so many young people, where we're looking at, look, when I was a kid, I read the Constitution the first time, I was memorizing all the amendments, probably don't even remember them, and I litigate those now, and just government was, wow, like, what a cool place to have a voice and to have the people do something all together, right, in this place that we call the United States of America. And man, young people, certainly there, are really pissed off. And if you look at, like, all of the opportunity that's being drained from younger people oftentimes, unfortunately, by older folks. We've set up situations in America right now where, heck, you look at Congress and everybody else who's up there, they're certainly representing people, but it's like a perspective that they have, right? And so they're doing fine, they're doing okay, and instead of thinking about our country as a place like, hey, this should be one that we're sustaining for future generations so our kids can grow up and they can be really proud of it, and this is where they want to be, and this is what they want to do. And there's a lot of folks who don't feel that way. Because everything costs more. How the hell am I going to save up to have a home? Or buy a car now? Or hell, even get to my job? And it's, look, I mean, that cannot be a path that our country goes down. And it's happening because there are wealthy, super rich people who have accumulated so much because they've made this system work really well for them. And then voices like ours aren't heard. And of all the offices, look, I love the Attorney General's office. I get this question all the time. Oh, you're just going to do this to run for Senate or something. Hell, absolutely no. The Attorney General's office is such a wonderful place. It's like the coolest job. You get to represent the people of Missouri. You get to go to court and fight for these things. And to me, it's fighting for a future that we want to have. Like right now, folks, they're leaving Missouri. We know how great, this state can be a great home for so many people. And there's so many folks who are being left out of that right now because our interests are not really being represented in any institution in our government. And so we do need a big change. And so, this topic, it's hard to even verbalize what I feel, but it is something that I have watched unfurl every single day. And it is a range of everything that there's no way that I could express to you. But, there is a basic underlying issue in our country right now, and it's that young people are feeling that opportunity slipping away. And we have got to do something to make sure that folks feel like we have a future, not only in this state, but in our country. It is imperative that we do that. So that's just some spouting of feelings, and thanks for letting me vent to you all for a little bit.
Next question. What can the Attorney General do to clear the backlog of sunshine law requests the state government has yet to comply with?
Do them?
Yeah, no, it's what can the Attorney General do to resolve the backlog of sunshine requests in that office?
Yeah.
By way of background, right now there's probably a year's worth of sunshine requests that have gone unanswered. The sunshine law is pretty clear. Elad knows this as about as well as anybody. You have to respond within 3 days. You have to process requests as expeditiously as possible. Granted, some requests are more complex than others. But if you file a sunshine request with the AG's office today, you're probably not getting a response for close to a year. Maybe 8 months, maybe 10 months. The AG's office is supposed to be the guardian of the sunshine law. The AG's office has power of enforcement over the sunshine law. The fact that the AG's office is failing to timely respond to sunshine requests speaks to deep-seated management problems in that office that go beyond just the sunshine law. Of the 226 lawyers who worked in the AG's office in 2022, only 112 are still on the job. When you have 50% attorney turnover, to say nothing of support staff, in a year and a half, that speaks to a fundamentally broken management culture in that office. And until we turn that around, you're going to see things like sunshine law requests going unanswered. You're going to see things like what Elad alluded to before, which is constituent services problems. People calling the AG's office for answers and not getting responses. You're going to see things like cases dropped, cases farmed out to private attorneys at great taxpayer expense. There are real problems, non-political problems, management problems in that office today that need to be resolved if we are going to build an Attorney General's office that will be effective at fighting for the rights of Missourians. What can we do to resolve the sunshine problem? Well, they need to hire some more people. They need to prioritize requests. They need to respond to requests that are easy and quick to get out as quickly as possible. I believe they're playing political games, that they don't want to respond to certain sunshine requests, so they bury them at the end of the stack. And that's not the way the law works. That's not the way the process should work. And I think it's one symptom of a much deeper management problem in that office today.
I agree. Yeah. Just do your job.
We have time for one more question, and then we will get to the closing remarks. For this final question, where do you stand on the claim of absolute immunity for the president?
You're not under a gag order for that, are you? I mean, just.
I was at the Supreme Court on this 2.5 weeks ago. I'm happy to talk about this all night long.
Yeah, you could listen.
Yeah, I think it's pretty simple. In 1982, the Supreme Court ruled in Nixon v. Fitzgerald that presidents have absolute immunity from civil suit for their official acts in office. The Supreme Court said, and this is with Richard Nixon, that conclusion naturally followed from Article 2, from the Executive Vesting Clause, and our system of separation of powers. Going back to the early republic, Marbury v. Madison, Chief Justice John Marshall said that the official acts of a president are never to be reviewed by the courts, are unreviewable in the context of either civil or criminal challenges. That case law is carried through. I mean, I could go on Martin v. Mott. I mean, some of the seminal cases in American history. When we're talking about official acts of the president, there has to be immunity, subject to the limitation of the impeachment and conviction process. Otherwise, the presidency itself will be crippled. We will end up with an endless cycle of politically motivated prosecutions and recriminations the day every successive president leaves office. Now, my sense from the Elad t-shirts in the room is a lot of y'all may not think particularly highly of my client, President Trump. I'm one of his attorneys. I was involved in this case. I would ask you to look beyond what you may think about President Trump and think about the structural implications of having a system where the day a president leaves office, any district attorney, any U.S. attorney in the country can indict them for their official acts in office. I mean, could Barack Obama be indicted by the U.S. attorney for the Middle District of Florida for drone strikes that he ordered that killed American citizens? Could Joe Biden be indicted for his actions or inaction at the border by a local DA in South Texas? Well, I would argue that he has, but more importantly, a local prosecutor might believe that he has. And I don't think our constitutional system sets up that chaos, sets up the idea that any prosecutor who can get a compliant grand jury to return an indictment can sit in judgment over a president's official acts unless the constitutional process of impeachment and conviction has proceeded first. Now, I want to caveat this. We are not talking about a president's private acts. If a president shoots someone dead in the street, that's a quintessentially private act. Bribery, corruption in office, those are quintessentially private acts, as have been held by the courts repeatedly in the speech or debate context, the judicial immunity context, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We are talking about a president's discharge of his official responsibilities in office. That's how I feel about presidential immunity.
Should be prosecuted if they break the law, whether public or private. It does not matter. If you are a public official, you break the law, you should be held accountable. Plain and simple.
An absolute
Generally, I agree with the statement that no one should be above the law. And that's really important. When the questions start coming from the Supreme Court justices about whether the president could order the military to assassinate political opponents, and the answer is, well, maybe. That's a problem, and I think even Judge Barrett was very like, that sounds pretty bad. No. I think folks should be held to the law, and we've had presidents, especially, well, a few probably, that have broken the law, and, one that's been pardoned. So, no, I think that I'm not the biggest fan of absolute immunity in a lot of situations. I mean, Heck, you brought up Ms. Gardner before. I had litigation against her office. I represented an 18-year-old who was put in the workhouse. It's now a closed jail here in St. Louis. She was held there for 7 months because she couldn't afford $100 in bond to get out. She was in a fight in the Loop, not very far from here, and she wasn't there. She was there as a kid watching. There was a whole bunch of kids just fighting over something, and the next day police found her and they said, hey, were you there? It's like, yeah, I was. Could you tell us what happened? Sure. Would you come to the station and tell us? Absolutely. And she told them everything. She never had an attorney during that whole process, and she was charged with a serious felony and put into the workhouse. And she was kept there for 7 months. When I went and visited her, I was volunteering as a public defender. And I said, look, I don't even know why you're here. There are 2 eyewitness statements, one of which says you were there and didn't do anything, and the other one says, I don't know who you are. And that's the entire case against you. So I'm going to ask the prosecutor to dismiss. And she said, that sounds great, but I need you to do anything to get me out of here. I will agree to whatever the prosecutor wants. I cannot spend another day in this jail. I said, but you didn't do anything. And she said, well, it doesn't matter. Get me out. And so I leave the jail, and I get my cell phone back, and they've accepted my entry as her attorney. I was wondering, why couldn't I see the case before? And the reason I couldn't see the case before was because it was dismissed against her 15 days before I ever met her. And she was just sitting in jail without any charges against her whatsoever. Ms. Gardner argued absolute immunity as a prosecutor, that, oh, I'm not responsible for any of these things. Unfortunately, she won on that issue at the 8th Circuit. And so I feel that when we put government officials to this level of the sovereign king that is running our lives and we have no recourse whatsoever, oftentimes the folks that get hurt are people like us in this room and poor people, especially in our legal system. So, no, I don't think that anybody should be above the law, and I'm very interested in seeing what the Supreme Court rules on that case. But you cite a lot of good cases.
We feel pretty good about it.
Well,
I'd say in response, I also believe that nobody's above the law. The question is what the law is and who enforces it. And when we're talking about the President of the United States, we're talking about core issues of separation of powers, the system of structured federalism. This implicates core constitutional doctrines. And I think the fact that no president, and we've had some pretty despicable presidents in history, the fact that no president had ever before been prosecuted speaks very strongly in favor of the idea that the assumption from our founding, as stated by many of our framers, was that presidents were not liable to criminal prosecution unless they were first impeached and convicted. I think that's what naturally follows from our constitutional system, and I think it's very important that we don't run roughshod over the Constitution, over the system that our framers set up to protect individual rights, all in the interests of politics.
well, so right, that's a view, absolutely. And look, I think separation of powers is extremely important. I wish we had more of it. But obviously, yeah, if you look at the attorney in our state, right, we elect an attorney general, not like the federal level, separately from all these other offices. We have extra checks within our state government, and so it's really important. Like we look at local elections, local government, state government. It's so important to day-to-day things that we all have to deal with. But right now, I mean, when we talk about official acts, what is an official act, what isn't an official act, and maybe that's where this all gets really muddied. But right now, we've got these 3 state senators who went on Twitter and they started defaming this poor guy who was drunk who wasn't during the Kansas City Chiefs parade. And he's sitting there and they're saying, illegal immigrant, shot up a bunch of people, Joe Biden's fault. And this poor guy had death threats, all of these things. He got a lawyer. All he asked for was an apology, and they wouldn't give it to him. And so he sued. And what are they doing now? They've run to the Attorney General. This is part of our official duties to tweet crap about people, so represent us. And he said yes. And so now we all have to pay for that. I worked at the Attorney General's office. Legal expense fund was a big deal. That is taxpayer money. There were times when I was like, I will sleep in my car so we don't have to pay hotel costs for me to be in Licking, Missouri for the night. And they said, don't worry, we got you the crappiest one. It's really cheap. But like this guy's just like, who cares? It's not my money. Throw it out. And I wish he was here right now. I would love to know what the hell is he getting to do that with our money right now. So look, I think that argument on official, private, maybe that's where this discussion really needs to go on all of these issues. But man, tweeting crap on Twitter is not an official act, and those guys, we should not be paying for it. We shouldn't be paying for it.
Each candidate will now have 2 minutes to make closing remarks. Whichever of you would like to go.
I said so many things today. Look, I am such a big fan of Missouri. Missouri is a wonderful, wonderful place, and there is so much good that we can do here. There's so much good that we have done here. And we really need a new Attorney General. We really need one. We really need one. I mean, we should be suing these scammers on our phones all the time. We should be suing these health insurance companies that are screwing us over all the time. We should be suing every single person who is wronging folks in Missouri. And there are groups that are coming to Missouri right now to exploit us. A lot of you know that I'm very much against puppy mills in Missouri, that little Liberty Bell dog. Yes, thank you. But there are folks who are coming to Missouri because they know, again, just a few days ago, we were ranked #1 for puppy mills in the country again. They come here, they set up shop because they know nobody is going to enforce anything against them. We need an attorney general who's going to take our interest to Jefferson City, go sue a whole bunch of people, and come home having represented us and our families. We need someone who's going to make sure that working folks in Missouri are protected on the job. We need someone here who's going to make sure that our justice system is working for all of us, that we have a state that works and that folks want to live in. And the attorney general can play such a big role in doing that. I would be honored to have your support in doing that because I know that we can get so much done here in Missouri. So I really appreciate you all for coming out. Thank you.
Yeah, the folks in Jefferson City are robbing us blind. It's time to kick them out of office. We have a political culture in this state that's fundamentally failed to defend the rights of ordinary Missourians, and they get rich while we get left holding the bag. It's absolutely shameful. When you have the lobbyist and special interest capture that we have in Jefferson City, government doesn't work the way that it's supposed to. Now, Elad's a Democrat, I'm a Republican. We disagree on almost everything ideologically, but I think he and I see a similar problem in Jefferson City, which is a political insider class that doesn't feel accountable to the voters of Missouri and that is willing to do anything it can to perpetuate itself in control. Until we start bringing new people into government, until we stop listening to the special interests and the lobbyists who do not have our interests at heart, and who, the only interests that they want to defend are their own and their clients, until we flip that script and change Jefferson City, we're going to continue getting the subpar, lousy government that has held this state back for decades. So Elad and I disagree on just about everything, but I think we do agree on the idea that the Jefferson City political class is fundamentally failing this state, and the absolute worst thing we could do is keep putting the exact same people back in office over and over and over again. The path forward for this state is by bringing new people into office, people who aren't beholden to the special interests and the lobbyists who currently have sway in Jefferson City, and actually taking on the very serious, very difficult problems that we have as a state, whether that's crime, whether that's education, whether that's economic stagnation. We can do this. Missouri can have a much brighter future than its past, but to do that, we're going to need new leadership. I've never run for office before. I'm kind of a nerdy guy. None of this comes naturally to me. I decided to run because I'm just sick and tired of the games that Jefferson City plays. And I'm sick and tired of seeing ordinary people left holding the bag for those corrupt games that currently run our government, that currently decide how we all live, that currently decide what the law is and how it's going to be enforced. The Attorney General's office is the guardian of Missourians' rights, or at least that's what it should be. The Attorney General should be out there every day fighting for the rights of ordinary Missourians, not the rights or prerogatives of special interests and lobbyists and insiders. That's a commitment I'm willing to make to all of you. Some of you may not like many aspects of my platform, but I would hope that on this we can agree. Jefferson City is a failure, and the only way we're going to change things is by kicking the bums who run that place out of office and bringing new blood into the Capitol. That was fun.
That's it?
Thank
Great.
you both for joining us.
Great, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you all. Thanks for coming. Thanks for having us, guys. Appreciate it. Appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you.